If you listened last week, we talked to Seth Meyers, and I kind of introed the conceit behind this Future of series. And part of the idea I had was that, I find myself having a hard time these days thinking about a future that is not like dire and cataclysmic and dark and dystopic. And part of that, I think, is a little bit of conditioning, having gone through several kind of cycles of optimism about the future, particularly as regards tech. I'm, in my early 40s, and so I'm old enough to remember like this incredible burst of techno-optimism, particularly in the kind of 1990s around the tech bubble, and then around social media, like everyone's going to be connected, and then that quickly curdles and becomes like, oh, there's going to be like, genocidal disinformation flowing through these same networks that we were supposed to just like share family photos on, and that's going to have incredibly horrific real-world consequences. And a lot of us, I think, are wrestling with the fact that like a lot of techno-optimism has curdled into this kind of like dark techno-dystopianism. So today is like an attempt, a kind of having a conversation around techno-utopianism. Like, what is the kind of most bullish case for technological innovation in the near term from someone who really is a believer in these technologies, a believer in innovation, and is so much so that her entire thing is betting on them, putting her money where her mouth is in the fund that she runs, which is the ARC Innovation Exchange Traded Fund. The name of today's guest is Cathie Wood. Now, if you operate in the world of finance and business, you've probably heard of her because she is the very rare investor who's kind of a household name. I mean, there's not a lot of those folks. Warren Buffett is probably the household name in investors and stock pickers. She was named one of the stock pickers of the year, I think, in 2020 by Bloomberg. She's both a famous and can be polarizing figure in the world of finance because she takes these very big bets. She has a very, again, optimistic view of technological innovation and disruption, and she makes as bullish as it gets on like, there's a bunch of technologies out there that are great, that are maturing, that are going to change the world for better, and that I'm betting on. and again, that's not my view. It's not sort of the way that I'm inclined to think about this stuff. I tend to see like the dark side of a lot of technologies. I think partly whether that's personal disposition or my experience with some of what we've seen over the last 10 years as sort of social media and smartphones has developed. But I thought it would be great to have a conversation with someone who doesn't take that approach, someone who is like really, really bullish on this stuff. And I learned a lot. A lot of this conversation has really stuck with me, even in places where I didn't necessarily agree or I don't see the trajectory going the same way as Cathie does. But I think you'll learn a lot. And I think the technology she talks about, some of them are ones I hadn't spent a lot of time thinking about, but the more I think about can really be quite transformative. So without further ado, my conversation with Cathie Wood. I really was excited to talk to you because I've been thinking a lot about the future. And this series that we're doing.
You have three children.
I have three children.
You have three children.
Right. So you think about the future for three children. I think about the future, well, for a bunch of reasons. I'm a journalist and I've been thinking about the way that I'm thinking a lot about how we conceive of the future in a cultural sense, utopian visions versus dystopian visions. I think we're in a very like dystopian dominant moment in sort of culturally, which I think makes a lot of sense. But I think about the future. The future is a dangerous thing to write about if you're a journalist because it's unwritten. But what you do is think about the future and then make bets on the future. You have to kind of put your money where your ideas are about the future. And I'm curious, maybe broadly, where you're thinking about where the future is going right now in a broad sense, and then we can break those out a little bit into which technologies, which innovations are going to drive that?
Yes. In a broad sense, we have never been like this moment in history in terms of the amount of change that is it's already started. We feel the ground, as you just said, shifting underneath us. It has already started. 5 major innovation platforms evolving at the same time. You have to go back to the early 1900s to see anything like it. You had 3 platforms then. You had telephone, electricity, and automobile. Today you have DNA sequencing. You heard it on the conference, DNA sequencing, robotics, energy storage, artificial intelligence, blockchain technologies. All of them are in exponential growth trajectories, and they are converging with one another in massively important ways and profound ways. And they're going to deliver, we believe, if you just take a look at the technologies themselves, over the next 10 years, we believe the market cap associated with these 5 platforms and the 14 underlying technologies is going to scale at a 30% compound annual rate of return. It is going to change for 2 reasons beyond the environmental concerns. One, the technologies are ready, the kind of battery technology, artificial intelligence, and robotics. Those 3, actually, that's a convergence taking place in the transportation field, whether you're talking about autonomous vehicles ultimately, or drones for parcels or food delivery and so forth. So yes, you're absolutely right. These worlds are, the digital and the physical world finally are converging because the technology's ready. And just as important, the costs are low enough. The costs were prohibitively high before, especially when it came to electric vehicle sort of battery technology. But thanks to Elon Musk, and I would say also to the Chinese, who are moving very quickly in this direction, that is no longer true. In fact, the total cost of ownership of an electric vehicle, most people don't know this, is lower today than that for a gas-powered vehicle. Most people just look at the sticker price, and we think in 2 years that they will be the same price. And then a few years after that, we believe that electric vehicles will be 30% plus lower in price. So these cost declines continue in emerging technologies, whereas the internal combustion engine is a very mature technology. So it is not enjoying any more cost declines. They ended a lot. Right. That's a very commoditized industry. Yeah. And I remember when China made a decision that this was one of its goals to dominate that sector. That's when the commoditization began. But there's another thing, and I think what will change the picture are solar roofs, like Tesla has designed. And the reason we think that's going to proliferate solar over time in a more comprehensive way is because the roof will be a part of the house. That's how it'll be financed instead of consumer installment debt and cold calling and so forth. So it will just become a part of our residential infrastructure, and it will become a part of our mortgage. So it'll be a very different adoption cycle than we think that we've seen thus far.
Right, because it's path dependent. It's built in. I mean, the same way that you buy a house and it has a bunch of features like how it's heated and how the water's heated. All of that's built into the house. You buy it, you get an inspector. Obviously, those things can break down. You can replace them, but the default starting point for any home, right, is that you got something to heat the water. You don't